Hey listeners, it's AZ, and you are listening to episode 114 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, where I sat down with the chief of the Loveland Fire Rescue Authority in Loveland, Colorado, Chief Timothy Sendelbach. Chief and I had a fantastic discussion about their health and wellness program, as well as some of the experiences he's had in working in over 7 states as a chief officer. It was a really interesting conversation. I think you can learn a lot about relationships and collaboration and getting services for your department by working with other departments. Give it a listen and make sure and share the podcast with someone you know will benefit. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hey listeners, it's AZ and welcome back to the podcast. Fun fact, this is the very first episode that I am recording in my new place in Oklahoma. And so I have the honor of having guest Chief Timothy Sendelbach on today. Chief, say hello to the listeners.
Well, hello, and thank you so much.
Well, I'm excited to have you. It's not very often. We just met about 30 seconds ago. It's not very often I have someone on the podcast that I haven't known for a long time. So this is going to be exciting. And I believe it was Russ from Frontline that put us in contact. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you, before we even get started, can you give me just a little bit of history of how you and Russ know one another?
You know, the fire service is about relationships. And a gentleman named Homer Robertson in Fort Worth was the assistant chief in Fort Worth. I was talking about coming out here to Loveland, Colorado, and working on a formidable fitness and wellness program. And Homer and I had the conversation, and basically what it led to is you got to meet this guy. He thinks like you, and so on and so forth. He introduced me to Russ, and we hit it off immediately. And we certainly have a common interest and a common drive to accomplish in the fire service. So,
which is what I hope that we're going to talk a lot about today. But first, let's get to know you a little bit. I have 3, I call them the rapid fire questions, and you can answer them any way you want.
Sure.
The first one is, who is Chief Sendelbach?
Well, I like to say this up front. I'm let's say a 40-year student of the Fire and Emergency Services. I don't ever call myself a veteran. Every day is a learning opportunity, and I mean that sincerely. I've had the opportunity to work across 7 different states as a chief officer, but I also took a unique track. I actually went into the private industry, into the media world. I was the editor-in-chief for both Fire Rescue Magazin and then eventually over Firehouse Magazin, which encompassed Firehouse Magazin, Firehouse.com, and 2 of their shows. So it was a pretty unique twist for me. I always say my parents never dreamed I would graduate high school, much less be an editor of a major publication. So I was able to come back, and now I currently serve as the fire chief here in Loveland, Colorado for Loveland Fire Rescue Authority.
I think that the fire service is an awfully small world, and I have a feeling you might know one of my literal firehouse neighbors, Janet Wilmoth.
I know Janet very well. Janet and I actually, when she was with Fire Chief, we were basically 4 editors within the fire industry. So we were partners in that process.
That is nuts. Yes, Janet's brothers, Don and Dan, they're twins. They were both battalion chiefs at my department long before I was there. And then the firehouse I was assigned to, Janet lived just down the street. So she'd come by in her car with her dogs and drop off goodies. She's amazing.
Yeah. And let me guess, they're poodles.
They are.
Yes.
Mimi or Mishi, or I can't remember.
I don't know their names. I just remember they're poodles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful, well-behaved dogs. So Such a small world. Chief, what sets your soul on fire?
You know, I would say this. I tell people I pinch myself every day being the fire chief for the LFRA, and I know that sounds cliche-ish, but the reality is the men and women that I work for here and represent are absolutely fantastic. So, what sets my soul on fire is just the good work that they do, and to be able to be at the helm and get them the resources that they need to continuously accomplish what they do every single day. And I realize that can sound very like rose petals and everything else, but I truly mean that. This is a unique organization. I'm incredibly proud to be the fire chief for LFRA.
You said something that I hear not very often, but I usually hear it from chiefs that are just awesome chiefs, and that is the individuals I work for instead of the individuals I'm in charge of. I love that.
Yeah, and I hope it doesn't come off the wrong way. People can say, "Oh, you're doing a podcast. You want to say all these flowery things." You know what? I believe it deep down. When I talk to firefighters, they tell me, "Hey, Chief, we appreciate what you're doing," and this is a team sport. Nobody has their individual name on the side of that apparatus. It's an organization made up of a collection of people, from the line staff to the folks in the office. We all work together, and I've never seen it at a level that I see it here. And I mean it. It is a great, great place to work. So.
I think that's incredible, and I'm so looking forward to this conversation. So please tell me, how are you changing the world?
I don't know that I'm changing the world. That's kind of a big leap. I'm trying to change the world around me in my circle of influence. I'm really focused on the 150 members of the LFRA and trying to give them the resources that they need, and then more specifically focusing on career longevity and life longevity. That was a drive as I came in. As every chief, when you do your speech, when you're appointed, you talk about your top priorities. And I did. I led with it. Taking care of our people is my number one priority, and that's their health and wellness, life longevity, and then just life in general for them. If the family life is disruptive, the work life is disruptive. So taking that in a holistic view and expressing the importance every single day in the work that we do and making sure that we're looking out for them from that perspective.
That's so good. And Chief, you mentioned that you are a 40-year student of the fire service and you worked in 7 different states as a chief officer.
Yes. I've worked in a couple of states as California and now Colorado as a fire chief. The other states, I was either a training chief or assistant chief. And all of those were great learning opportunities, all progressively moving up in various size organizations. But it was just, I think it really set the stage for me. And then my private industry is really what set the stage for me being a fire chief because of that political acumen that it introduced me to.
So let's start digging into, can you give me sort of the specifics and I guess how many department members you have, stations, shifts, all of that good stuff, just a little bit of background.
Sure. So LFRA has 150 members, 15 of which are volunteer. We have probably one of the most diverse terrains for an organization our size. 187 square miles representing urban, rural, and suburban. Have our own airport, so we have ARF personnel. We have a downtown like any other community, but we go up into the Rocky Mountains, which really gives us the diversity of terrain and that wildfire influence. So line staff, we got 103 line staff. Those folks are working a 4896. A couple of weeks ago, we just brought on our first seasonal wildfire team, which I'm incredibly proud of. We had the largest wildfire in Colorado history in 2020, just before I got here. And I identified that risk and was very fortunate to be able to bring on this mitigation crew that's just doing fantastic work in our communities and really putting an emphasis on the preventative side, because in the wildfire arena, you can't catch it. Once it starts, it's going to do its thing. So we want to get ahead of it there. And then just have an incredible staff all the way around me, just as well, as far as office staff, training staff, and so forth.
And you mentioned that you work at 4896. And how many stations are you running calls out of?
Yeah, I'm sorry. 10 stations. One of those is an ARF station. Two of those are basically our wildland stations in the mountainous areas of our district. So.
Okay. So, Chief, when you arrived for your new appointment, you said it was in 2020. Is that right?
2021, October 4th, 2021.
2021. Can you give me just a little bit of sort of history? What did the health and wellness program look like when you were coming into the department?
Yeah, so we were doing a modified annual physical. Actually, it was every 2 years. They were doing treadmill tests, reaching set METs through a local university. And that was meeting the need, but there was also the true medical screening that was not being captured in that process. And that's really what intrigued me, is that it's great to test people and evaluate people, but I really think you need to take that deep diagnostic dive to make sure you're catching things early. So we went down that path of 1582 physicals through an AFG grant. We did a regional AFG grant, landed it for 5 different departments, and that's where we brought in Russ and his team from Frontline to be the contractor to offer that.
So we had periodic physicals, but not maybe comprehensive or NFPA compliant. Did you have any sort of a physical fitness training program, nutrition, counseling, mental health, anything like that upon your arrival?
No, I wouldn't say. We definitely didn't have anything on the dietary end. As far as physical fitness, all of our stations are adequately equipped with workout equipment. There's no structured program. Certainly, the members are open to work out during their downtime, and we try to accommodate that as best we can. So from the behavioral health side, we got a fantastic behavioral health program. We have a peer support team, a very robust peer support team. And then we have a staff psychologist that we share with our police partners. So we do that on a 60-40 split. And that's been a fantastic program.
So I'm very intrigued to talk to you about your department, because a lot of times when I talk to fire chiefs that have a very robust health and wellness program, they're big departments. They have 900, 1,500, 3,000 members. And so my listeners sometimes email me and they're like, Annette, that's great. We just can't do that because we're small. And a lot of them say we're between 100 and 200 members. So I'm excited to just dig into sort of the progression of where you started and where you are now. So you got the AFG, mm-hmm. and that was for your comprehensive medical physicals. What was the next step?
So with that, what we wanted to do, part of our problem is to be able to facilitate it locally, as opposed to even those periodical physicals that we were doing, we would have to pay overtime. Then it was the transit time to go to the location, which was outside of our community. So right now, we are in the process of building a health and wellness facility at our training center. And this is where I compliment Russ and his staff. We were literally driving around town. Frontline hadn't put a footprint in Colorado. We were the first ones. And I really wanted to, not to be possessive, but as a matter of convenience, keep it local. So we were driving around different venues, and we were at the training center, and Russ said, well, what about that building right there? And it's really on the edge of our training center. It's a building that we use for search and rescue. And I said, that would work for you. He says, absolutely. So then I pursued a federal appropriation through Congressman Neguse. We landed that. And now it was all for rehabilitation. You couldn't build brick and mortar from the ground up. You had to modify a current building. So we're taking a old search and rescue prop. I know that sounds crazy, but it actually, structurally, it's sound, it meets the needs. So we're going to transition that to a health and wellness center So once you come down for training, you can go right to the Health and Wellness Center, get your physical blood draws. If you need PT therapy or anything like that, it's local. The other thing I would advocate when you talk about these smaller organizations, we're 150 members, 10 stations, over 187 square miles. Everything we do is based on a regional concept. Don't keep it at home, share it with your partners. Because at the end of the day, we look at it. The Rocky Mountains, when they burn, they're the great equalizer. They tell every one of us, or they humble us and say, you can't do it alone. I don't care how big you are not big enough to handle Mother Nature. So that really convinced me that the regional approach and everything we do, whether it be group purchasing, warehousing, physicals, is the right approach. And that's worked incredibly well, starting with the AFG grant.
Chief, you said a word. I don't think that I'm familiar with it, and I hope I caught it. You said you got an appropriation. Is that the word you used? Can you
Yeah,
explain what that
so
is?
it's in essence, it's a federal grant, but at the end of the year, congressional members are allotted a certain amount of funds to take care of their districts. So it's an appropriation that the congressman was able to put forth to support us in this effort to take care of firefighters.
So, in theory, um, a department in, say, Illinois or South Carolina could get in the ear of their congressperson and say, we're trying to create something here. Can you help us with an appropriation? Am I understanding that correctly?
100%. Now, there's a couple of things. You have to go in various categories. I went down, I think it was the allied health route. So there was various categories of eligibility, and that's why it was a refurbishment versus a brick and mortar type of appropriation. But let me, if I can, just say this, and I don't want to turn this into a political podcast, but the reality here is what you said as a new chief, but a chief that's pretty well experienced across 7 states. If there's any advice I can share, is getting involved in the political system. Look beyond all the controversy and the current things that are happening at the federal level and the frustrations that people have with politics. This world is about politics. Our success and failure and what we can do for our firefighters is all about our ability to play the political game. Politics is not a bad thing. It's about communications, it's about relationships, and it's about influence. Those 3 things are all critical in our business. So if you can influence a behavior, influence a vote through relationships and good communications, you're going to achieve success.
I honestly think that if we got disconnected right now and could not reconnect on this podcast, I think that you just taught the listeners something I had no idea. And I have a feeling many of the listeners didn't either. So that's incredible. And you said something that I am a very big proponent of. I always talk about it in Illinois. I'm not sure how many other states have it, but we have the mutual aid box alarm system, the intergovernmental agreements between departments that when we have whatever, you're going to come. You already said you would. And so I've always said, why don't we use our MABUS divisions for health and wellness? If you've got a department of 87 people and you say, I don't have enough money to hire an athletic trainer, what if you got with the other 5 departments in your MABUS division? Then you'd have enough money. And that's exactly what you're talking about with your regional program. Am I correct?
100%. In the MABUS system, which I'm very familiar with, it's not a local model, it's a national model, if not a global model for us to look at. And I would advocate looking beyond just some of the more simplistic things of response. That's the obvious, that we should all play together well in the same sandbox. But I went down another path of group purchasing, bulk purchasing, discounted rates, all of that kind of stuff. Where it becomes fearful for people is it takes away your identity as a separate entity. And the reality is Miss Smith, Miss Jones, Miss Rodriguez, and Miss Wu, they don't care. Our objective as a public servant is to offer a service. And at some point, we have to get away from the individuality and say, what makes us elevate the bar in the service that we provide? In a system like MABUS, with a holistic view of how we can capitalize on the mass numbers to better serve, that's what we should be doing. My personal opinion, humble opinion. So
Well, now we have two people with that
okay.
opinion, at least you and I. And I'm sure there are others. For some reason, though, it seems when I talk to chiefs about that, I just kind of get the like furrowed brow, like sharing a professional, and they're less interested in actually getting the professional than trying to figure out how that would work. And I just think it would be so simple.
Yeah, I think we're at a crossroads today as we see volunteerism going down and the struggling volunteers, whether it be East Coast to West Coast, and the new proposed OSHA standard that's imposing wellness checks on volunteers and anybody making a response. We're going to be forced to make some pretty dramatic changes. And I think it's all going to be based on what we can do with our relationships to achieve success.
I think you're right. And before we go on, because I have so many more questions about your program, are you comfortable talking about those OSHA standards a little bit, kind of educating the listeners on those?
Yeah, I mean, I can't go in depth. I'm like everybody else. I'm trying to read what comes out. I'm not going to say that I'm by any stretch well read on it. I'm just trying to keep up and keep pace. So.
Okay. So, in addition to those requirements for sort of health and wellness for the volunteers, are there more robust requirements that are coming down the pipe that you're aware of?
Yeah, I talked about this. I was doing a presentation in Indiana last weekend for the Indiana volunteers. And, one of the things I told them is, pump the brakes on the anxiety because we went down this path in 1992 with NFPA 1500. And Chief Brunacini was at the helm. I talk about he wears the road rash or wore the road rash for us. And there were 20,000 public comments from firefighters saying that you're going to bankrupt fire departments all across the country with these safety standards because it's an unfunded mandate, and an OSHA requirement is exactly that. Having said that, today, roll the clock forward from 1992 to 2024, it is the most referenced standard in our business to accomplish safety within our business. So I think we got to pump the brakes, allow the system to do what it does, allow the frustrations to air in a constructive way, and then let's just march forward. We're going to be a better fire service in the end. But part of this is breaking down some kingdoms of individuality that is self serving as opposed to community serving.
And then remembering that we as firefighters, we do tend toward that sort of anxious reaction to things because I believe they say the things we hate are the way things are and change. So
Sure. I think that's a human element too, though, not just firefighter. It's a human element.
that could be
Yeah.
sometimes, I think, exacerbated perhaps by the microcosm of the kitchen table.
I've never been married, but I'm a divorce attorney when I'm sitting at the kitchen table. I can give you all the advice on marriage counseling and everything.
Yes, and engineering
Yeah.
and
Firehouse fish
vaccinations,
storage.
all of it. It's
Yes.
true. Okay, so you received the appropriation to refurbish the building, and I'm assuming that project is complete, or are you still in the process of that?
No. That's a good one. I think that's kind of a trick question. It's a federal appropriation. So respectfully, and please take this respectfully, I have to discern the migration habits of birds and everything else to ultimately accomplish what we're trying to achieve. So it's a longer process. I say that jokingly. I hope nobody takes that the wrong way. But there are some federal requirements. For example, Build America. So it has to be built in America, any construction products, HVAC, all of that, which is perfectly fine, but it limits your contractor pool, does put a forward face on America, and I appreciate that. So we are in that process. We're getting ready to go to bid. And then I hope to be fully functional by October and then have Frontline move in at that point.
Amazing. And then Frontline will be able to pull employees from departments regionally to use that facility, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, so they offer a two-tiered approach. They can do an on-site approach at our facility, which will be their Colorado headquarters, and then they can kind of ship their folks out. For example, a larger department wants to go through their medical physicals. They are mobilized to go to them with a whole nother assortment of evaluation tools, and then they come back to our facility and do their day-to-day operations. Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. So from the medical monitoring standpoint, I think we got that one checked. Now, how about have you grown in terms of your fitness? You mentioned that employees are allowed time while they're on duty, but do you have professionals involved in the fitness program at this time?
Yeah, so we're taking a stair step process. We're building as we speak here. Let me go back to the assessment. So let's just say, well, we have an assessment. Somebody is unfit for duty, and it's based on their BO2. So what we do is immediately, and we're walking our members through this process right now. This is our first year of implementing. You're unfit for duty. I immediately pull you off because I have a responsibility here. Number one, to take care of the crew and the individual that is unfit for duty to get them back. So I pull them from duty, and the objective will be to give them 45 days. And then they would meet with one of our peer fitness, and we're calling them wellness fitness trainers because they're not pure fitness. There's another certification that they now carry. I think we're calling them health and wellness trainers. So what will happen is they got a 45-day window. You prescribe a program that appeals to them. And for example, if they don't do CrossFit, that's not their thing, we're not going to force that on them. Mm-hmm. So we have a guy, and I use it, it's a classic example. He says, Chief, I don't like flipping tires. Roger that. I love hiking. Okay, so if you have to lose weight or improve your cardiovascular wellness, here's a hiking prescription for you. So they do that 45-day window, and within that window, they have to be retested. Okay, at least at the 45-day mark. They could do it at any point in time they feel ready, but at 45 days, they got to retest to try to get back on the job. If they don't, they got another 45 days that now it's a prescribed program and it's more regimented. You have to follow the program, and then there's another evaluation there. So that's the process that we're currently going through. And then there's the other side, the diagnosis. If you get a medical diagnosis that you're not fit, then we send you to your personal physician. You have to come back to us with a note that says you are fit to do the job. And then you'll go through the evaluation process again. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And these health and wellness who are peer trainers,
yeah.
How many of them do you have? And then what certification did they go through?
Yeah, I want to say 6. Okay. And that's dispersed across the job and shifts as well. And I knew you were going to ask me this. It's a unique. We went down the pure fitness, so we had a number of pure fitness certified folks, but we decided to go down a different route. And for the life of me, I can't remember what that certification is. It's more on the athletic side of it. But our people felt like it was an advanced certification above and beyond the pure fitness certification.
Is it by any chance the tactical strength and conditioning facilitator credential from NSCA?
Actually, NSCA sounds familiar.
Okay. That might be the one.
Yeah. I don't want to say absolutely because
nope.
I'm not certain. So
it's one of the other ones that it's that's pretty well recognized. And did your folks happen to get it in Colorado, in
yes.
Denver? Yeah,
yes.
They probably went to, it's called Fast Performance. Joel Rather owns it, and he puts
I
on
believe
that
that's correct. Yes.
Joel is great. Listeners, if you get the chance to host a TSAC facilitator course, that's amazing. But if you can't get your department to host it, definitely take advantage of going to see Joel. He does it 4 times a year. He's incredible. And a side note, he just posted on Instagram the other day, he was in Denver and they were putting him through I think they just had a burn tower thing going on. So he got all geared up and got to go in the tower, and he said he had a blast.
Nice.
I asked him, Joel, how did it feel to walk into a 1,000-degree oven wearing a pot holder?
Yeah,
And he said that was a good description.
that is a good description.
It is. Only
Yeah.
the pot holder is coated with a raincoat
Yes.
to
Yeah.
make it less breathable. Okay, so we're approaching fit for duty. You're implementing it. They have the 45 days. They have the additional 45 days. They have the health and wellness person to help them with it. All of this sounds great. How is it going as far as the panic level at your department? Is everybody cool, calm, and collected?
Yeah, I would say that. And, as we continue to roll this out, there's going to be those individual situations that we got to look at and say, it's situation dependent. You got a unique situation that we're going to evaluate. I think the key for me as the fire chief is to continuously reference the fact that I'm not here to drive you off the job. I'm here to create that life and career longevity. And I'm also here for the responsibility of looking out for the crew that you're working with. If you go down due to a medical emergency, you put others at risk. So I want to make sure we're a cohesive group looking out for each other. I haven't had the panic out there, but there are those oddities in every organization or idiosyncrasies that we'll face. And I respect that. And I think I have an obligation to work with them to kind of get them over that hump and calm their nerves.
Chief Nick Perkins from Pflugerville. I spoke with him a few episodes ago, and he said the only thing he would have changed. How did he word it? Maybe he didn't say the only thing, but he said one of the things he would have changed when implementing their fit for duty policy was he felt like they did a little bit too much of building the airplane while they were already flying.
Yeah.
There wasn't quite enough communication on the front end. And so it sounds like you've got the communication on the front end, which is super helpful.
Yeah, I think that's putting the benchmarks out in front of people, like full implementation 2025. So our big focus here is getting people off the line, getting them in a rehabilitation program and back on the line. Whereas last year, we just went through the process. We had some folks that didn't necessarily meet the standard, but we didn't have a formidable program to get them back. So that was kind of we're going through the minefield a little bit, but now we're taking the next step and we're putting goals and objectives out there in 2025 to really make the program more robust.
Building it a little bit,
Yeah.
piece by piece at a time. That's so good. I have to go backwards for 1 second because I should have clarified in my own brain and I did not. Once you have the building finished and Frontline is locating themselves in the building, will Frontline have on staff athletic trainer, physical therapist, professionals such as that, or will your individuals, would they need to go outside the organization for that care?
Well, that's the next phase. So Frontline will not have that, but one of the things with this building is there's an added room that we would focus on either a physical therapist, combination physical therapist, personal trainer. That is kind of that next evolution. And the other side of this, so we're talking about the Health and Wellness Center. Simultaneous with that, we're going to be going down the route of building another facility that'll have a larger gym facility that if you are going down there for PT or a prescribed program, now we have a venue with a trained professional to guide you day to day through that process. So to your point, it's an evolution. We're taking step by step, but that is definitely on our radar screen.
I like how you're sort of putting the brick in, making sure that it's level and true, and then putting another brick in. I like that.
And if I can share something, because I want to go back to your comment, I so appreciate this, the smaller organizations. So that peer fitness trainer, whatever that person, whatever skill sets they have, can we afford that outright? As a 150 person organization, can we say that we're going to have a workload for a full-time person? Probably not. That's where I talk about partnerships. We're part of what is called the FRFC, the Front Range Fire Consortium, 12 partners coming together. So this is where I would pursue it on a shared cost perspective and say, can you pay 1/12 of a salary of a full-time employee, and they will be there out on the ready for your employees. So while I may not be able to pull that off because geographically it's a large span of departments, but if I can get 6 departments to agree that that person serving in that capacity at that location would be equally convenient for them, then we've reduced our cost and accomplished something we couldn't do alone.
And I truly believe that once you begin realizing, let me back up. I don't necessarily think that we should try to justify health and wellness because we might recognize a return on investment. I kind of think we have to go with it's the right thing to do with our people. But we are going to get a return on investment. That's without a doubt. And so once maybe 6 organizations are together and they're getting 1 day a week with a person and they start to realize that return on investment, there might be money for a second person and a third person eventually, I think.
Absolutely. And to your point, what you prevent is hard to justify,
Yes.
right? The numbers don't track well. So
I always say that health and wellness interventions are very much like fire prevention. We never know how many lives the panic hardware and the fire alarms are saving because it's upstream, same as health and wellness.
Yeah.
I think that I want to share with you something. I used to be much more strong in my opinions. The best way, the only way to do health and wellness right is with an outside professional who is highly competent and credentialed. Now I soften that a little bit. 2 things can be true at the same time. I truly believe that outside, highly skilled, culturally competent professional is your best solution, but also true at the same time can be an organization probably can't afford that, at least to start out with. So I just think that this sharing is so brilliant. So I may have missed this, but are the other organizations in your area already supporting the initiative with funding? Or are they sort of sitting back, waiting and seeing how it's going to work and then jumping in?
Well, I think the AFG grant kind of forced us all to come together really quickly because we had a timestamp on it. So everybody bought on. There were people that were sitting on the sidelines that have since now jumped in. So that has been incredibly successful. So now we have kind of a win that we can refer to as we go down these other paths. And I'm using the backdrop of the FRFC because we do a shared service employee there. So we have a demonstrated track record to say, shared service employees work, you pay a portion of it, and we all accomplish much more together. So while we're venturing outside the health and wellness realm, we have examples in our other venues that we can refer to say, we can accomplish this better together.
And what, Chief, if you can say, what is your shared employee that you have right now?
So it's administrative staff for the FRFC. So we run joint training academies, and we needed administrative staff. Well, the FRFC, as an independent entity, could not afford that. So we all chip in, and ultimately we get a full-time staff member to do the administrative support. So small example. Yeah, small example.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I often think about this in terms of like IT. Our department that I just retired from for years had an IT person. And then prior to that, they had some firefighters who were just very clever and very good sort of doing IT. So they had firefighters, then they had a full-time person just for our department. And then they decided to contract out the services. And things just went south after that. So I think this model of a shared employee is so much better than, say, an outside contractor.
Yeah. When there's that personal relationship and connectivity as well. And I suspect that's what you had with the IT, because we're a unique IT user. We have very specific tools and equipment relevant to our profession. And then the other general office administrative things are in every IT realm. But having that specific relationship and pride in serving in this profession, I think does differentiate service levels as well.
How do we talk to chiefs? Because I know it's difficult being a fire department administrator. I don't know firsthand, but I can appreciate that it's difficult. And how can we get the message out to them that it's pretty simple consideration to consolidate departments as far as health and wellness services? Like, what words can we use for them?
I won't say it's simple.
Oh,
I
okay.
won't go out. I won't go out on that realm because I think you have to refer back to relationships. You have to value relationships and get over the individuality. At the end of the day, nobody's getting that participation trophy. We're all in this together, and nobody's being singled out. So the point is the relationships matter, and when you have solid relationships, and this has to start in the everyday operation. For example, every other Thursday, there are 12 chiefs here in the Front Range that get together and we have breakfast. That sounds so elementary. But the reality is when you start casual, you have those conversations on the most casual of level, and then it goes to the professional level. It really starts to build a bond of comfort that you're not trying to impede on my territory and vice versa. And I think that's where you start. And then it does become simple because there's confidence, there's trust, and there's that cohesive bond equal to what a crew would have in a fire station. And let's not fool ourselves. As you rise up in the rank, you start to basically take on that island living. And it's not the most pleasurable island that you're living on. I oftentimes refer to it as Alcatraz. There's not a lot of friends on that island. It is island living, but there's not a lot of friends on that island. So think about that. A crew is a cohesive bond. As a fire chief, you're on an island. You got to find folks that you feel comfortable and trustworthy with as well.
That is incredible advice. And I never thought about the chief living on Alcatraz before, but now that you mention it,
Maybe not the best example.
no,
I'm
I think it's great. It's
speaking
great.
randomly here.
There's no palm trees with coconuts where you are.
No,
I
no.
understand. So during this process, while you're waiting for your facility, we're waiting for Frontline to get up and running, are there any other sort of initiatives or little cogs in the wheel that are chipping along in the background?
Um, well, yeah, I mean, the changing standards are interesting to us now. The 1582, the proposed changes there, how we're dealing with it, the interpretation of BO2 versus METs. There was a definitive mark on the METs. Once you hit 12 METs, you tapped it and you were done. And there was some degree of relief amongst the members. Now there's the VO2, the unknown of the VO2. I incredibly supportive of it and understand that it's a much better diagnostic side. There is that uneasiness. So I think that continual education process. And then here's the back end that we're working on right now is medically, you've been cleared. Now let's clear you from a functional perspective. All your body parts work, but can you throw a ladder? Can you drag a human being out of a building? So there's that functional test that we need to implement as well. And anytime you do incumbent-based testing, there again is a nervous energy. And we're marching down that path. We have a test. I personally don't feel like it's the test for the future for us. I want something that is a little bit more robust, a little bit more challenging, and definitive of the work that we do. So we'll see where that goes, but that's our next step that we're kind of working on parallel tracks.
I think you have your hands full, Chief.
Oh, it's great. It allows the day to go by fast, but it also, it brings me excitement too, because there's those benchmarks that we're accomplishing, and I know we're building the right thing for the future.
There's such a spectrum of both knowledge and implementation on health and wellness in the fire service. And I really hope that the future brings a lot more chiefs that are so knowledgeable about it, such as yourself, because I think that that's really going to make a big difference. I
I,
think even more than mandates and rules and NFPA, I think having chiefs that really understand health and wellness is critical.
I agree. I think I would also advocate you got to represent that. You know, I don't think the best person on the nozzle necessarily makes the best fire chief. We've argued that for years. But at the same time, you've got to be a reflection of what you're advocating. And I'm not throwing stones at anybody, but if you're not holding yourself to the equal standard, now I'm not advocating a fire chief be out there pulling hoses, but the reality is it's a reflection of the organization across the board, health and wellness for our office staff. You know, our office staff is equally stressed. They may not see the trauma and everything else, but we got to be a reflection of that too, looking out for them and not just the men and women that are riding on the red trucks.
Well, speaking of that, I was looking at your bio before we logged on, and I see that you compete in long distance triathlons and related fitness events around the world. Tell me more.
So, this is where peer pressure, firefighter to firefighter, comes into play. You had mentioned Illinois. I have a great friend in Illinois who was a fire chief at the time, and he was doing Ironman events. And at the time, I think it was the training chief in Savannah, Georgia, and I was running marathons just so I was doing something to get me out of the office and maintain my fitness level. And I was posting them on social media, you know, like anybody else, getting my little pats on the back, indirectly, directly, whatever. One day he says, "You know what an Ironman says to a marathoner, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't have a clue." He said, "Cute," because the back end of a full Ironman is a marathon. Well, by the looks of my helm, I'm not the cute guy, and I'm not going to take that. So that was my incentive to start doing triathlons. So we did a number of them together, and I will proudly say, and I hope he does hear this, he never once beat me. So,
Well, I know only one triathlon joke, and I'm probably not going to deliver it very well, but I think it goes something like this. A hippo can outrun a human and outswim a human. So your only chance of winning a triathlon against a hippo is on the bike.
fair enough. That's why it's three separate sports, right? Hey, if you ever get confused, it's right after left, repeat very often. Right? Swim, bike, run, pedal, whatever. So,
it's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Chief, are there any, say, topics we should have dug into that I didn't get to today? If not, any parting wisdom for firefighters and fire departments out there for health and wellness?
Yeah. One thing I really, and Russ and I have talked about this and some of his staff, is the entry level. You know, one of the things I really like to concentrate on, because I got a strong background in training, is that introductory training. We are a paramilitary profession, but oftentimes we'll set up the drill sergeant to run the academy. And while I think there's some great opportunities there, there's also some cultural shifts that occur that are not necessarily conducive to health and wellness for the long haul. So, for example, and I don't know your position on this, the old saying, no pain, no gain. Well, in the academy, we create a lot of pain, right? And a lot of push-ups, a lot of stair climbs and so forth. But I don't really think that sets you up for success in the fitness world because, you know, it's that consistency. It's building that aerobic capacity for the long haul versus every time I work out, it's going to be a painful experience. I really think we need to look at that in a little different light, maybe change the mindset of saying, you know, we want you for the long haul. The way we do that is consistency in your training, not always injecting pain. There is a time to stretch the limits, but it's not every single workout. So thinking about how we introduce people to our profession through the no pain, no gain concept and the overarching paramilitary environment. there's a place for it, but it also needs to be regulated, that it's not over the top. So, and if I can, just one more little cliche here. Chief Brunacini used to say, we train people for the Marine Corps and we send them to the Peace Corps. And I think that is such a brilliant statement, because we beat on you on the front end and then expect you to be kind, compassionate in the delivery of service. So the two don't necessarily mold and mesh real well. So.
Well, there's so much to be said that's being learned nowadays about it's called trauma-informed training, and so that and trauma-informed treatment of, say, individuals that are injured. And I think that, unfortunately, I think we do an awful lot of traumatizing those candidates without really having the expertise to know really even how to do what we're doing, in my opinion.
No, I think you're 100% correct.
I think there are candidates that you and I think, I mean, you're doing Ironman, so you must love to train. I love to train. The typical human doesn't love it. They tolerate it because they need to, or they don't do it. And so we take these candidates that either don't do it because they hate it or they barely tolerate it, and then we just make it horrible for them. In the academy, they don't come out going, ooh, I'm going to stay in shape. They come out saying, I'm never doing that again.
That's exactly right. 15 weeks, and now I got to carry him for a 25, 30-year career with that constant effort of putting focus back on training and health and wellness, when they're just like, no, I made it through, I'm done. And so there is that front loading that we need to work on.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant. I always ask my guests, because I'm such a dog person, so I always ask, do you have a dog or dogs?
I don't. And the running joke for me is I have a stuffed animal that I move from room to room around the house because I travel a lot. And it would be tough for me, as much as I would love to have a dog. In Colorado, Loveland specific is dog centric. I can't have a dog. So I got a stuffed animal. I move them around the house. So.
Well, same for me. I love them so much. I cannot justify. It would not be a great life for a dog, but I do not have the stuffed animal, and I may have to follow suit.
It's a joke. I don't have this. I don't have stuffed animal. No.
Well, I don't know if I believe you now. So
yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, Chief, it has been such a pleasure to speak with you today. I am so grateful that Russ put us in contact, and I think with that we can probably drop the mic. What do you think?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks to Russ as well for introducing us. And I hope you'll kind of keep an eye on LFRA and our progress.
Absolutely, and I'd love to have you back when you're ready to share more.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Listeners, this has been AZ and Chief Tim, and we are officially out.